Hi, friends. It's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. This is the final episode, I guess, in the series of creating patterned backgrounds. If you haven't been able to watch part 1, 2, and 3, I do have them linked up down below in the description, and I've also added a card in the upper right hand corner of this video. This is part 4 of creating the pattern backgrounds. And if you've seen the other 3 videos, I have shared several samples like this, actually these samples of different pattern backgrounds that I've created with different stamps in my collection. I like to make the stamps be the star of the show, and we can have as much of a pattern with the stamps or a less of a pattern with the stamps. So it's been fun creating this little bit of a series to show you different ways that you can create patterns to have a really interesting card base. And the stamps are the star of the show. I'm always looking for ways to use my stamps to the nth degree to create beautiful card bases. So let's go ahead and talk about the supplies. I'm using Gina K Designs layering white cardstock at cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I have a selection of my stamps in the Gina K Designs collection. And I have a variety of stamps that I've been using, and I'm using different stamps in different ways. So the key to creating these patterns have also been the color choices that I've made. So I've got colors here that work from light to dark. Okay, let's talk about the design and creating patterns and my simple technique for creating patterns for your card fronts. Super simple. I work in what I call clusters. So you can see here in my drawing that I've got 3 clusters here, one in the upper left, one in the middle, and one in the lower left to create that visual triangle. So when I'm stamping on my card front, I think about stamping my visual elements in clusters. And then slowly I'm building up the pattern to cover that entire card front. But I'm just focusing on working in these little clusters of 3 to create the final pattern. So let's go ahead and dive into the Wildflowers and Weeds stamp set that I'm going to be using. And I'm using this pattern is going to be made up of using a couple different stamps from this stamp set. Whereas some of the other patterns I've used one solid and one line art. I'm using a couple different stamps from this stamp set to nest them together into clusters to create this pattern. I'm going to grab a few of the leafery images, meaning some solid and some line art and some of the little blooms, and I've got some of the open line blooms. So I have that little viola that's an open line viola and the little tiny small little budding kind of viola, but it's a solid. And I'm going to do a mix in this pattern of solids and line art images with a variety of different colors. So I've got jelly bean green, grass green. I've got apple mint here, and that's a little bit of a different variation between these 3 greens, but it's going to give it a little pop of color. I'm going to throw some wild dandelion in there. That's definitely going to happen because wild dandelion seems to show up in every single one of my cards. So let's go ahead and get started with the design, working in 3s. Again, with that cluster of 3s, starting from that top left to the middle right to the bottom left. And I'm using this open line leafery image and just kind of playing with it here, going off the edge of the card, but creating a little bit of a visual movement here. So I've got it from the top to the middle to the bottom. It looks kind of like it's in a little whirlwind of movement here. Now I'm going to come back in with the solid version of this stamp in the jelly bean green, and I'm just going to ink it up, and I'm going to follow my pattern again from the upper left to the middle to the bottom. And this time I'm just going to nest the leafery image in between the other leafery image. So again, elongating the movement here. So it's not really a cluster. It kind of is a cluster, but I'm elongating the movement of the leafery here to take up a little bit more space on this card front, but also create a lot of movement and variation in the color. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move on to adding in my third color with the deeper green of grass green. So I'm just going to open up that ink and I'm using the same stamp. So I've got the solid image of the leafery, and I'm going to again create some movement with the leafery here by going off of the edge of the paper. So I've got that cluster going and I'm nesting that image, that stamped image within the leafery that's right next to it. But I've created this kind of movement that's kind of circling up and off of the paper, but from the upper left to the middle and then to the bottom left. So you can see how each three of these clusters have a lot of movement, but they're moving in this like circular fashion off of the edges of these corners. And I am digging this. Now, you could stop right here and you could add some embellishments, stamp things out, add embellishments, add a sentiment, and just have this card have a little bit more white space going on with it. But I'm going to take a deeper dive and play with the line art viola and just kind of nest this viola. I also like the size of this. This flower bud is kind of big, not huge like a lot of my other flowers, but because it's a line art, it's a sweet little image. You're able to just kind of stamp it out with this wild dandelion and just kind of turn a little bit, but cluster it in close with the leafery, and you get this really sweet looking pattern that's starting to come to life. And I can't tell you how much I love wild dandelion with the mix of jelly bean green and grass green and apple mint. I mean, it's just an amazing color, creates a lot of beautiful contrast. And this pattern already has a natural look and feel to it. Now, I'm going to take it another step further, and I'm taking the silhouette image that is the viola, but it's a silhouette of it, and I'm going to pop it in here and cluster it close to my leafery, again in that threes, but I'm using the innocent pink just to add a little touch of sweetness to it with that innocent pink color. Now, again, this pattern looks fantastic. You could stop right here and you could add your sentiment and you could pop it onto your card base, run it through your die cutter with a master layouts die. I personally love the scallop master layouts die. I use it over and over again, but I'm going to add just a little bit more texture and dimension to this by adding the leafery element that's a line art image. And I'm going to stamp that out in the grass green. Again, following my pattern clusters of my images at the top left. I've got this cluster of images towards the middle right and a cluster of images at the bottom left. So I'm going to you can see me just kind of noodling around to see where I can make the connection between this stamp and the cluster that's next to it or underneath it. So I'm going to just kind of play here, and I'm going to go outside a little bit over and off of the edge, and just kind of nest it with the flowers, the viola flowers that I stamped down in the wild dandelion, to just kind of create another layer of dimension here with that grass green. Now I just love this design. It's just really clean and sweet, and we've got all these natural elements going and these natural colors going. I'm going to go back in and use my innocent pink and add the little viola, that sweet little viola, back in and just kind of create another cluster of images just to see what I can do with it. Now, I've decided to go off the top, and I'm loving the line art contrasting up against the solid image. And between all of the colors, you can see how sweetly they come together. And I'm just creating this pattern where I still have some room in the center, and I could fill that all up if I wanted to. But I'm not going to, because I really like the movement that I've got going on here in that kind of circular movement going on. And again, I might want to run this through my die cutter using some of the Master Layouts dies. But here's the other thing. I'm doing a quarter turn on this design so that you can see from each way that I turn it, the design can work for your card front and you can add your elements. So when you use this technique, you can think about your card patterns going horizontally or vertically. Super, super easy. So here are all 4 of the patterns. And if you've been watching the entire series, I've been showing the patterns at the very end. And we used the same technique, but we got 4 very different looks. I hope you have enjoyed this series as much as I have. So head over to my website at indigojadeart.com/craftyourjoy and grab all of my stamp set freebies. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And I'm sharing more card and watercolor tutorial videos for your inspiration right here. So come on in and take a peek at my tutorials. I have a lot to share, and I'll see you next time.